Crafty and New. In today's video, we are doing some beautiful fall easy DIYs. Let's get into it. So for this first DIY, you're just going to need one of these wooden rounds that you can get from the Dollar Tree. And I actually like the fact that they're carrying these like all year round now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide me up 3 equal sections of this circle. So I'm just going to go down 4 inches from the top and up 4 inches from the bottom because this is a 12-inch round. So I've got 3 equal sections of 4 inches. And I'm just going to mark them off with a line so that I know where to place my painter's tape. Now you can see here I've got my 3 equal sections, and I'm just going to mark those off with some painter's tape above the line that I marked, so that way I can paint the middle section.
Yesterday there was sun and there was rain. Beauty in the
Now once I have my middle section marked off, I'm going in with some antique white paint, and I'm going to give this 2 coats. And once those 2 coats are dry, I'm just going to remove my painter's tape, and then I'm going to tape off the middle piece so that I don't get paint on it. And I'm just going to go above the line there with my painter's tape.
And as the light startled our eyes, we let go of disguise. And now there's something in the air and a sparkly shimmer on our skin.
Now with this brown oxide paint, I'm just going to put a little bit in some water, and I'm going to make my own stain with it. And you can see here I'm just going to put a little bit in just a little tiny bit of water, mix it up really good, and then I'm going to paint the top and bottom of this round square. And I end up having to give it 2 coats of this, but you can see it turns this into a real pretty, like, I don't know, I just thought this color turned out to be very pretty. It's like a light, almost like an oak color, a darker oak color. Anyways, you can see here once we get it all painted what it's going to look like. And then once I have 2 coats on that, we're just going to let it dry, and then we're going to take off the painter's tape.
Restoring everything within.
Now while we're letting that dry, I got this welcome word out of a pack from the Dollar Tree. It has welcome, harvest, and something else I don't remember. Anyway, I ended up taking it apart because we don't need the O, so I just took some snips and I just snipped out the O. And then I'm going to use, it's like a pavement, it's called pavement, I think. Anyways, it's kind of a mix between a black and a gray paint, and I'm going to give that 2 coats. And then while that's drying, I'm going to take this wooden pumpkin that I got out of a pack from Amazon, which I'll put the link to that in the description box below. And I'm just going to go over it with the Waverly pumpkin paint. And I'm going to give this 2 coats also. And then I'm going to use the brown oxide to paint the stem.
Dreamy, breezy, we go. Easy, easy on our tiptoes. Undercover.
And now I'm also going to dry brush some lines in the pumpkin to kind of bring out, to not make it look so blah. I'm just adding some dimension to the
Agents of the other, beyond gravel, beyond all.
And I noticed I got a little dark with my lines, so I'm just taking a baby wipe and I'm just kind of muting that by wiping some of it off. I just thought it looked a little too dark there. It was a little too much dimension. Now, once all of our pieces are dry, we're going to glue those onto the wooden round. And as you can see, I'm using a ruler just so I could get the letters even and straight. And I'm just going to hot glue those down. Now, I did notice you kind of have to hold it down because for some reason these were wanting to pop up from the hot glue. I don't know. Anyways, it was a little bit aggravating, so I didn't put all that on film. And then I'm going to take my pumpkin, and that's going to be my O in the word welcome. And we're just going to glue that down on top of the C and the M. And for all of you that have OCD, no, this isn't exactly centered. and it's not supposed to be. So you may want to turn your heads because this will probably drive you nuts. So anyway, I'm just going to glue that down, and then we're going to move on to making our bow. Now, as you can see here, some of the paint came off the metal words, so I'm just going to take my paint and I'm going to touch that up with a little paintbrush. I'm going to do that at the very end because it's going to continue to rub off that metal. For some reason, the paint wasn't wanting to stick on that metal. So this is just some of the ribbons that I'm using. You can use any ribbon you want for the bow because it's just going to be a messy bow. It's just going to be a bow, a simple, super easy bow. Now this is some greenery that I got from Amazon, and these are some floral picks that I got from the Dollar Tree. And you're going to notice that what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these off the stem because it's just going to make it lay on my plaque better. So I'm just going to use some wire cutters and I'm going to cut all these off. And then once I have all these cut off, you're going to see me Frankenstein, what I call Frankenstein, these stems. So what I do is I pop these off. I don't know if you're familiar with florals. You should be if you're crafting. And you know that the end of the florals will just pop off. I'm going to take these berry picks that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to pop those onto the greenery. Just so that way there's not as many stems that I'm going to have to glue down. It's not a big and bulky, it's just not big and bulky, I guess I should say. This way I still only have one plant. Anyway, you'll see what I'm doing. And then, it's hard to explain. And then once I have all of those Frankenstein together, I'm just going to take some jute twine and I'm going to tie the stems together, as you can see here. And then we're just going to hot glue those down onto the plaque. As you can see now, it's not big and bulky. I'm just using the greenery. And I'm just going to take a bunch of ribbon and I'm going to make a messy bow. And it's best just to let you watch instead of me explaining. And you can see what I do here.
Hand in hand, building castles out of sand, reaching for the grand. As willows align, we lose track of time. Head up high, now we climb. Dreamy, breezy, we go. Easy, easy on our tiptoes, undercover agents of the other, beyond gravel, beyond known. A bigger scale, the world inhales as we go. I wouldn't want it any other way, no. Dreamy, breezy, we go. Easy, easy on our tiptoes, undercover agents of the other, beyond gravel, beyond known. Dreamy, breezy, we go. Easy, easy on our tiptoes.
Once you have the bow glued on, that makes this project complete. Let me know if you like it by hitting that like button and leave a comment in the comment section down below and let me know if you enjoyed this DIY.
Undercover agents of the other, beyond gravel, beyond known.
Now for this next project, you're going to need 3 arrows, and the arrows that I'm using are from this sign that you can get from the Dollar Tree. They have the same sign every spring. So I'm just taking these arrows off and I'm going to cover the front of them with some Mod Podge. And once I have those covered, I'm just taking some scrapbook paper that I got out of a paper pack that I purchased from Michael's. It was a fall paper pack. I picked out 3 patterns that I liked, and I'm just cutting them down to size and gluing them onto the front of these arrows. Once I have all that paper glued on, I'm just taking a knife and I'm cutting off all the excess. And as you can see here, I also painted the back of my arrows. Now this isn't something you have to do. I just did it because I like the project finished, and you're going to be able to see the back where I'm going to have it. You don't, like I said, you don't have to paint the back if you don't want to. And then once I have it painted and the paper put on, I'm just going to sand down all the excess. And then I went to my Cricut and I printed out some words off my Cricut. You don't have to use a Cricut. You could use stickers. You could paint these on here, whatever you want to do. And I printed out the words corn maze, pumpkin patch, and apple orchard. And I'm just laying them out how I'm going to want them put on there. And you want to make sure you put the wording on the right arrow or your sign's going to look a little wonky. So now I'm taking this stick that I got off of a Dollar Tree. It was one of their, I don't know. It was like an apple orchard sign that you could stick in the ground. I just took all of it off so I could use this stick. And I ended up cutting off 6 inches off the bottom because I wanted it to be shorter. If you don't have something like this, you can also use a paint stir stick, or you can use, whatever you have on hand, which is basically what I did. And now I'm just marking where I'm going to have the arrows go so that I know where to put the hot glue. And I'm going to glue all 3 of these arrows onto this post. So once I have all my arrows glued on, this is what it should look like. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 of these tower tumbling blocks and I'm going to make me a stand. And the easiest way to do this to make sure that it'll actually stand is just while you're holding the sign up, just slide the blocks right next to it. This is the best way I have found to make sure that your blocks on there even so that this is actually going to stand. But this isn't all that we're going to use to make the stand. I'm also going to use a little square piece of wood, scrap wood that I had. And I'm going to glue that down because this is going to be a structure I need to add some pumpkins and some excelsior on the bottom. So I'm just going to glue those 2 down onto my square wood piece. And once I have that glued down, I'm also going to glue some excelsior on top of that. And before I decide to glue the excelsior down, I decided to go ahead and paint this black to kind of match the front of the stick that I'm using. The front of the stick was black also, so I just went ahead and painted the front and the back and the stand in black. And then I glued the excelsior down, and then I'm also gluing some pumpkins down underneath. And once you have those pumpkins glued on, or gourds, or whatever you want to use, that makes this project complete. Let me know what you think of it by leaving me a comment in the comment section down below. And don't forget to give me a big thumbs up. It really helps my channel grow. Okay, so for this project, you're going to need a pumpkin from the Dollar Tree. It's one of these like 3D pumpkins. And you don't have to do this because I ended up changing my mind. But for the paint, I decided to use antique white. And I'm going around the edges of the pumpkin. Welcome Shadow. And she gets a little spicy here. She decides she's going to bite me. But we move on. And anyways, once I have that painted white, I'm going to go back in with the brown oxide, my favorite brown paint. And I'm going to try to mix that with the antique white. But the problem is I still didn't end up liking it. So I ended up changing the paint scheme of this pumpkin. So you can completely skip forward in this video because it didn't turn out looking like this. I ended up doing something totally different with the paint. But anyways, I wanted to leave this in here in case you did like this paint scheme. It was just a little too light for me for the type of scrap paper that I'm going to be using. And again, I'm going back into that scrapbook paper pack that we used on the last project. And right here I'm showing you it, this is the pack that I'm using, and it's the Craft Smart from Michaels. And they always have a really good sale sometimes on their like last year scrapbook papers, and I ended up getting this pack for $9.99. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a piece of scrapbook paper and I'm just going over the edges or the ridges of the pumpkin so that when I lift this paper off, I can see where I actually need to cut it. It leaves a little indentation in the scrapbook paper. So it just helps me figure out where I need to cut it. And as you can see here, the little indentation that it left. And then I'm just going to cut that out, and I'm going to take another piece of scrapbook paper and I'm going to do the same with the two raised sides of the pumpkin. And we're just going to glue those down using some school glue. Once I have all my scrapbook paper cut out and glued down, I'm just taking my brayer and just making sure it's got a nice, make sure it's adhered to the pumpkin really well. And then here's where you can see I go in and I decide that it's too light and I change out my paint scheme. And I just go right in with, directly in with the brown oxide. And because I just thought it was too light. So yeah, it's up to you what color scheme you want to use. And then here I'm using one of these little sunflowers that I got out of this package you can get from the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to take it apart. And I'm just going to take out the middle of the sunflower because I'm going to use an orange button instead. So once I took out the middle of the sunflower, I just glued it down to my pumpkin. And I'm going to take some jute twine, and I'm going to make me 2 even sections, and we're going to make a bow out of those. The reason why you need 2 even sections is because I just wanted a double bow, I guess. I am having a hard time finding words today. Let me know if you guys have that sometimes. I woke up and my head's killing me and not feeling too well, and I'm just having a hard time finding words. So I apologize if it seems like I'm kind of just muttering and stuttering through this video. Then once I have my bow made, I just glued it down into the middle of the sunflower, and then I'm taking my orange button and I'm gluing it down to the middle of the bow, and that makes real pretty topper for my pumpkin. Now what I did is I went on my Cricut and I just printed out or cut out some scrollies. I call them scrollies, I don't know what they're actually called. And I cut out 3 identical ones, and I'm just going to cut these up and glue them down to wherever I want them on the pumpkin to make it look all nice and pretty and fancy. I do want to say that I did use cardstock to print these out, and it was a scrapbook paper piece that I got out of the same paper pack that I used on this pumpkin. So once I have those glued down and put where I want them, I'm just going to take 2 tower tumbling blocks and I'm going to glue those down to the pumpkin, and that's going to be my stand for this. And it's going to stand up all on its own, and it's going to look very pretty for fall, and that makes this project complete. If you guys enjoyed this video, please share it. Don't be afraid to share it with other people. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because my channel grows when you subscribe, and I could really use the growth right now. And I want to say thank you to all of those that have already subscribed and have been with me for some time. And I want to wish you all a great and wonderful fall. And stay tuned, because this is just the beginning of my fall DIYs.